You are encroaching on community property.
I have the survey.
That doesn't give you the right.
Check the flags.
Sir, step away from the shoreline before deputies remove you from the property. Vanessa Holloway said it loud enough for every person standing near the docks to hear, her cream-colored raincoat snapping in the lake wind while fog rolled low across the water behind her. She held a black HOA binder against her chest like a judge carrying a sentence. Two landscapers killed their equipment at the same time. The sudden silence under that metal-roof pavilion felt heavier than the thunder building over Blackwater Lake. I stood ankle-deep in mud beside an old cedar survey post half buried near the shoreline, coffee thermos still warm in my hand, and looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. "You sure about that, Vanessa?" I asked quietly. Her smile tightened. Not angry yet. Worse, confident. The kind of suburban confidence built from years of nobody challenging her in public. "I'm absolutely sure, Grant," she said. "This section of shoreline belongs to the HOA. You've been warned repeatedly." Then she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of everybody. That was the moment people started staring at me like I was dangerous. A fisherman near the dock slowly reeled his line in and backed away. Somebody whispered, "That's the guy from Lot 14. Another woman lifted her phone chest high, pretending not to record. Rain ticked softly against the aluminum roof overhead, while cold wind carried the smell of wet cedar off the lake. Vanessa turned slightly, so the crowd could hear her side of the call better. "Yes, I need a deputy at Hollow Creek Estates immediately. We have an aggressive trespasser refusing to leave private community property." Aggressive. That word hung in the air harder than the thunder. I watched her carefully because people like Vanessa always tell on themselves when they think they've already won. She wasn't scared. She wasn't protecting anything. She was performing. And that performance had an audience now. "Folks like him move in and think rules don't apply," she added, loud enough for the dock workers nearby to hear. There it was. Humiliation. Public pressure. Social positioning. Classic HOA warfare. I could feel eyes shifting toward me from the gravel driveway, where pickup trucks sat lined with rainwater running down the tailgates. Nobody wanted to be seen agreeing with the man being accused by the HOA chairwoman in broad daylight. About 30 seconds later, one of the landscapers muttered, "Damn," under his breath when he noticed the county survey flags beside my boots. Bright orange. Freshly placed. Vanessa saw them too. For the first time all morning, her smile flickered. Just a little. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to know something underneath this whole thing had started to crack. If you've ever dealt with somebody who thought they owned an entire neighborhood just because nobody ever pushed back, comment below with your city and tell me the worst HOA power trip you've ever seen, because what happened after those deputies arrived only got worse for Vanessa Holloway. The first deputy rolled in slow through the gravel lot, with windshield wipers dragging across the glass and rainwater spraying under the tires of his county Tahoe. Nobody talked while he stepped out. That silence hit harder than shouting. Just the sound of lake wind rattling loose dock cables somewhere out in the fog and rain tapping against the pavilion roof. Vanessa straightened immediately when she saw the badge, smoothing the sleeve of her coat like she was preparing for a board meeting instead of a trespassing complaint. "Deputy Collins," she said warmly, already smiling before he reached us. "Thank goodness. This man has been harassing our contractors and interfering with community property improvements. Not hello. Not facts. Narrative first." Collins looked tired in the way county deputies always look during long, wet mornings. Mid-50s maybe. Mud on his boots. Coffee stain near his shoulder mic. He glanced at me, then at the orange survey flags near the shoreline. "You Grant Mercer?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "You threatening anybody out here today?" "No, sir." Vanessa let out a short breath through her nose like she could not believe she was even being asked to share oxygen with me. "He knows exactly what he is doing," she said. "We have elderly residents terrified to use the lake access now." That caught me off guard for a second because it was so calculated. She wanted witnesses thinking this was about safety, not land, not control. Fear travels faster in communities like Hollow Creek than truth ever does. I noticed two residents standing near the mail kiosk avoiding eye contact with me completely now. One of them, Dale Brunner from the corner lot, had shared bourbon with me by the fire pit 6 weeks earlier. Now he looked at the muddy ground like knowing me might get him fined. Collins walked closer to the shoreline markers. "County survey?" he asked. Scheduled for 11, I said. Vanessa jumped in before I could say another word. That survey is unauthorized. We already disputed it through the HOA legal committee. Committee. She said it like Congress had ruled on it personally. Collins rubbed rain off the back of his neck and looked toward the dock extension where fresh lumber sat stacked under a tarp. Who approved construction before the property line issue got resolved? For the first time all morning, Vanessa hesitated half a beat too long. Tiny thing. Most people would miss it. I did not. The board approved shoreline beautification last month, she answered carefully. Not the question he asked. Around us, the atmosphere shifted again. Subtle but real. One contractor quietly stepped away from the lumber pile and pulled out his phone. Another looked toward the access trail, like he was calculating how fast he could leave if this turned into liability. Thunder rolled somewhere behind the hills, low and distant, while fog thickened over the waterline. Collins crouched beside one of the old cedar stakes buried near my boots and scraped mud off the metal cap with his thumb. Then he looked up slowly at Vanessa. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this marker predates your subdivision by almost 20 years. Nobody spoke after that. Not the contractors. Not the residents. Even the lake seemed quieter. Vanessa's smile stayed in place, but it looked different now. Tighter. Thinner. Like somebody holding a glass together after the crack already started. Vanessa recovered faster than most people would have. That was the dangerous thing about her. Embarrassment did not slow her down. It sharpened her. She folded her arms against the cold and gave Deputy Collins a patient smile, like he was a substitute teacher misunderstanding a lesson plan. "With respect," she said smoothly, "old markers do not override current community plats." The residents standing near the dock nodded automatically, because that was what Hollow Creek had trained people to do over the years. Agree first. Ask questions later. I could almost feel the social gravity pulling the crowd back toward her side. Rain drifted sideways off the lake now, light but steady, tapping against pickup truck hoods and turning the gravel access road darker by the minute. Collins stood up slowly from the shoreline marker and looked at me. "You have paperwork with you?" he asked. "Not on me," I said. Vanessa smiled again immediately. Too quickly. Exactly. There it was again. Performance. Public confidence. She wanted everybody watching this to remember one image only. Grant Mercer standing empty-handed while she stood beside official-looking binders and contractors. But then another truck rolled into the lot through the fog. White County Survey pickup. Mud splashed along the lower panels. Two men stepped out wearing reflective rain jackets, carrying tripods and equipment cases. I heard somebody behind me whisper, "Oh hell." Vanessa turned toward them so fast her boots slipped slightly in the mud. Tiny loss of control. Tiny crack. This survey was never approved through the architectural committee. She snapped before they even reached us. The older surveyor glanced at her calmly. "County order, ma'am. This is private community land." "Maybe," he replied. "That is what we are here to determine." Around us, the energy shifted again. Residents who had been avoiding eye contact with me 10 minutes earlier started quietly drifting closer to hear better. Curiosity was overpowering loyalty now. Hollow Creek loved drama more than principle. Vanessa noticed it too. Her voice softened immediately. That fake polished concern tone returned. "Grant," she said, almost sympathetically, "nobody wants this to become ugly. If you leave now, we can probably avoid legal complications for everyone involved." It sounded reasonable if you did not know her. But I had spent the last 8 months learning how she operated. Everything with Vanessa was about controlled isolation. Separate the target. Make them look unreasonable. Push privately. Smile publicly. I looked out across the water for a second while fog rolled over the fishing docks farther down the shoreline. The old marina lights glowed dim through the mist like courthouse lamps on a storm morning. I thought about the first week I moved into Hollow Creek after my divorce. How quiet the place had seemed back then. How badly I had wanted peace. "You already made it ugly," I said quietly. That landed harder than shouting would have. One of the contractors actually looked away after I said it. Another resident near the pavilion lowered her phone completely. Vanessa's expression changed for half a second. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. Because she suddenly understood something important. I was not bluffing anymore. Before she could answer, the younger surveyor called out from near the cedar marker. "Rick," he said to his partner, "you need to see this." Everybody turned. The younger man had uncovered another metal pin buried beneath wet shoreline mud about 12 feet from the HOA dock path. The older surveyor wiped rain off his face and stared down at the marker for several long seconds. Then he looked directly at Deputy Collins. This property line is nowhere near where the subdivision maps show it. And just like that, every person standing there realized the problem was no longer me. Nobody moved after the surveyor said it. Rain kept falling softly across the lake, turning the shoreline slick and black, while fog pressed low over the docks like smoke trapped under a ceiling. Deputy Collins slowly looked from the buried marker to the paved walking trail curving past the pavilion and toward the new dock extension the HOA had started building 2 weeks earlier. Suddenly, that trail did not look decorative anymore. It looked expensive. One of the residents near the mail kiosk quietly said, "Wait, are you saying the trail is on his land?" Nobody answered her directly, but people started stepping back from the shoreline instinctively, like ownership itself had become contagious. Vanessa noticed immediately. You could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes. "There has clearly been some confusion with legacy survey materials," she said smoothly, regaining control of her tone even while rainwater dripped from loose strands of blonde hair near her collar. "But the community has maintained this property openly for over a decade." Maintained, not owned. Small wording change. Important wording change. Collins caught it too. His expression stayed neutral, but he folded his arms and looked toward the dock path again. "Who authorized excavation for the footings?" he asked. Vanessa glanced toward the contractors before answering. The board approved shoreline improvements unanimously. One contractor immediately cleared his throat and looked down at his boots. Another quietly started loading equipment back into the truck bed without waiting for instructions. Nobody wanted their name attached to this anymore. The social temperature had changed completely. 10 minutes earlier, I had been the outsider getting publicly accused beside the lake. Now residents were watching Vanessa carefully for signs she had lied to them. That was the thing about HOA communities. Loyalty lasted right up until property values felt threatened. I could hear low whispers starting under the pavilion. She said legal already cleared it. I thought the county approved everything. My God, what if there is a lawsuit? Vanessa heard them too. Her jaw tightened slightly before she forced another practiced smile. "Everyone just needs to stay calm," she said. "There is no reason to create unnecessary drama over a technical issue." Technical issue. I almost laughed at that. 8 months earlier, she had threatened me with daily fines because my fishing boat trailer sat 6 inches too close to the gravel edge of my own driveway during a storm week. Nothing had ever been technical when somebody else was under her authority. Thunder rolled again across the hills, deeper now, and the sound bounced off the water in long, slow waves. Deputy Collins stepped closer to me quietly while the surveyors continued checking measurements along the shoreline. "You knew about this before today?" he asked under his breath. "I suspected it," I said honestly, "but I needed confirmation." He studied me for a second like he was reassessing everything about the morning. "Why not bring it to the board privately?" Before I could answer, an older voice behind us cut through the rain. "Because they already knew." Every head turned. Eleanor Whitaker stood near the gravel drive holding a folded umbrella and a grocery bag against her coat. 70 if she was a day. Lived 2 streets over. Quiet woman. Kept mostly to herself. Vanessa's face drained almost instantly when she saw her. Not panic yet. Worse. Recognition. Eleanor walked slowly toward the pavilion while wet cedar leaves stuck to the heels of her boots. 3 years ago, she said carefully, the old developer sent a warning letter about those shoreline boundaries before he died. Nobody said a word. Even the contractors stopped moving. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. "Eleanor, this is not the place for rumors." But Eleanor did not stop looking at me when she answered. "I kept a copy." Eleanor's words landed over the shoreline heavier than the thunder. You could feel the entire mood under that pavilion shift from curiosity to suspicion in real time. Vanessa opened her mouth immediately, but for once somebody else spoke first. "You said there was never any issue with the land," Dale Brunner said from near the mail kiosk, his voice uncertain but loud enough for everyone to hear. Vanessa turned toward him slowly with that polished smile she always used right before somebody got socially punished. "Dale, this is exactly why legal matters should not be discussed emotionally in public." Emotional. That word irritated people more than she realized. especially after she had just called deputies on a resident beside a lake full of witnesses. Eleanor stepped closer through the wet gravel, rain tapping softly against her umbrella while she pulled a weathered manila envelope from her grocery bag. "I kept it because Harold told me to," she said quietly. "He said if anything ever happened to him, somebody decent should eventually know the truth." Harold Bennett, the original developer, dead almost 4 years now. The moment his name came up, I saw genuine panic flicker across Vanessa's face for the first time all morning. Not irritation, not controlled frustration. Panic. Deputy Collins held out his hand slowly. "Ma'am, may I see the letter?" Vanessa moved before Eleanor could answer. "That document is likely incomplete and could easily be misinterpreted without legal review." There was the control again. Not denial. Containment. But Eleanor ignored her completely and handed the envelope to Collins. Rainwater dripped from the deputy's sleeve while he unfolded several pages inside. Nobody spoke while he read. Just lake wind moving through the cedar trees and distant thunder rolling somewhere over the county line. One of the surveyors quietly removed his cap and rubbed the back of his neck. Even the contractors had stopped pretending to work now. Collins finally looked up from the papers. "This says the shoreline transfer was never finalized because of a disputed access easement." Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. Harold Bennett was in declining health toward the end of his life. He left behind multiple incomplete filings. "It also says," Collins continued carefully, "that future boards were warned not to build permanent structures on the disputed parcel until ownership was resolved." Silence again. Thick silence. The kind that settles over small-town diners when somebody important gets exposed in public. A woman near the dock whispered, "Oh my God." Another resident slowly lowered his phone after realizing he had probably recorded half the disaster already. Vanessa noticed that too. She started losing control of the crowd now, and she knew it. This community invested hundreds of thousands of dollars improving this shoreline, she said sharply. People here deserve access to the lake. Access. There it was. Not ownership. Not legality. Desire. I looked out across the fog rolling over Blackwater Lake and suddenly understood the entire thing much more clearly than before. This had never been about confusion. Vanessa wanted this shoreline because it transformed Hollow Creek from another quiet lake subdivision into premium waterfront property. Walking trails, kayak launches, community dock expansions, higher home values, political control, legacy, and my cabin sat directly in the middle of the one piece they never legally secured. Collins folded the letter carefully before speaking again. "Ma'am," he said to Vanessa, "did your board disclose this dispute before approving construction?" Vanessa did not answer immediately. That hesitation told everybody standing there more than words could have. I watched residents start pulling away from her physically now. Small movements. 2 steps backward. Folded arms. Avoided eye contact. Hollow Creek had spent years orbiting Vanessa Holloway like she controlled gravity itself. But gravity changes fast once people think lawsuits are coming. The rain finally started coming down harder about 20 minutes later, turning the shoreline into slick gray mud while residents huddled beneath the pavilion pretending they still had somewhere else to be. Nobody was leaving now. Hollow Creek had crossed the point where gossip became history. Deputy Collins stepped aside to answer a call near his Tahoe while the survey crew continued running measurements down the edge of the lake with orange paint marks appearing every 30 feet through the fog. Every new marker felt like another crack spreading through Vanessa Holloway's authority. She knew it too. Her voice had changed. Less polished now. Sharper around the edges. "Grant," she said quietly as she approached me near the dock railing. "You are creating a situation that could financially damage every homeowner in this community." There it was again. Not apology. Pressure. Always pressure. I leaned against the wet cedar post beside the fishing dock and watched rain ripple across Blackwater Lake. "I did not build on disputed land," I said calmly. "Your board did." Her jaw flexed slightly. "The community relied on representations made years before either of us lived here. Then maybe your board should have verified them before spending association money." That one landed. I could tell because she immediately glanced toward the residents under the pavilion instead of answering me directly. She was losing the crowd, and she knew visibility mattered now more than legality. 2 homeowners were already whispering while staring at the unfinished dock extension like it had transformed into a sinkhole. Somebody else was taking pictures of the survey flags. Vanessa lowered her voice further. You could still resolve this quietly. Quietly, meaning privately, meaning controllably. I looked at her for a long second and finally understood what had been bothering me all morning. Vanessa was not afraid of losing the shoreline. She was afraid of losing the narrative. You knew there was exposure here, I said. That is why you called me a trespasser before the county could finish the survey. Her expression froze. Tiny movement. Tiny confirmation. Before she could respond, Deputy Collins returned holding a small notepad damp from the rain. Mr. Mercer, he said carefully, county zoning wants all active work along this shoreline paused until ownership verification is complete. One contractor muttered something under his breath that sounded expensive. Another immediately shut down the portable generator near the lumber stack. The sudden silence under the rain hit everybody at once. No saws. No nail guns. Just water hitting metal roofs and distant thunder rolling over the hills. Collins continued. There is also a question regarding whether the HOA disclosed the unresolved easement issue to its liability insurer before beginning construction. That changed everything. Residents reacted instantly because insurance meant assessments. Assessments meant money. Panic spread through the pavilion faster than any legal explanation could have. Wait, our dues paid for this. What happens if somebody gets sued? Are we personally liable? Vanessa stepped forward immediately, trying to regain control. Everybody needs to stop catastrophizing. There is no indication of wrongdoing. But nobody was listening to her the same way anymore. Dale Brunner actually stepped away when she moved closer to him. Eleanor Whitaker folded her umbrella and stared directly at Vanessa with visible disappointment instead of fear now. The emotional gravity had completely reversed. I felt something shift inside me too, standing there in the cold rain. For months, I had been reacting to Vanessa Holloway, defending myself, explaining myself, trying not to become her next target. But this was different. This morning beside the lake, she had finally overplayed her hand in public. And now the county was involved. The survey was active, residents were panicking about liability, and the story no longer belonged to her. Collins handed me a temporary work suspension notice to post near the dock entrance. Vanessa stared at the paper like it physically hurt her to see it in my hands. Then the younger surveyor called out through the fog again. Deputy, he shouted, you might want to see where this dock pathway actually crosses. Even before Collins started walking toward him, I could tell from Vanessa's face the answer was going to make things much worse. The younger surveyor was standing 20 yards down the shoreline, where the paved HOA walking path curved behind a row of soaked cedar trees near my cabin lot. Rainwater streamed off his hard hat while he pointed toward a set of fresh orange paint marks cutting directly across the asphalt trail. Deputy Collins stopped beside him and stared down for several long seconds without speaking. Then he slowly looked back toward the pavilion where the residents were gathered under the metal roof. This pathway crosses private parcel lines in 3 separate locations, he said loudly enough for everybody to hear. You could feel the air leave the crowd all at once. One woman actually covered her mouth. Another resident muttered, Jesus Christ, under his breath near the dock railing. The social collapse started immediately after that. Quiet at first, Hollow Creek style. Nobody confronted Vanessa directly. They just started creating distance. Physical distance. Emotional distance. Political distance. Residents who had spent years orbiting her authority suddenly found urgent reasons to stand somewhere else. Dale Brunner walked clear to the far side of the pavilion, pretending to answer a phone call that never rang. 2 board members who had arrived halfway through the chaos stayed completely silent near their SUVs, refusing to make eye contact with her at all. Vanessa saw every bit of it happening in real time. Her composure started fraying around the edges now. This is being blown completely out of proportion, she snapped, louder than before. The community acted in good faith based on existing plats. But nobody nodded this time. Nobody rushed to defend her. Even worse, people had started whispering openly. She knew. That is why she pushed construction so fast. Did our dues pay for illegal work? Rain hammered harder against the pavilion roof while fog drifted across the dock lights and turned the whole shoreline gray and cold. Deputy Collins walked back, carrying the temporary suspension notice I had posted near the dock entrance 10 minutes earlier. The paper was already curling from the rain. Ma'am, he said carefully to Vanessa. Until the county completes its review, Nobody from the HOA is authorized to continue work or restrict access related to this disputed parcel. Restrict access. The irony hit the crowd instantly. 30 minutes earlier, she had tried to have me removed from my own land in front of the entire neighborhood. Now the deputy was effectively warning her instead. Vanessa folded her arms tightly against the cold. "So he just gets to humiliate this community publicly?" she asked, staring directly at me now. There was genuine emotion in her voice for the first time all morning. Not confidence. Not manipulation. Humiliation. I looked at the unfinished dock, the fresh survey paint cutting across the walking trail, the residents whispering beneath the rain-dark roof, and finally at the woman who had spent months trying to convince everyone I was the problem. "You did that yourself?" I said quietly. Silence after that. Deep silence. The kind that settles over a courthouse hallway after a bad verdict. Nobody defended her. Nobody even looked at her. One of the contractors climbed into his pickup truck and drove away without saying goodbye. Another followed 30 seconds later. Eleanor Whitaker stood near the gravel drive watching Vanessa with visible disappointment instead of fear now, and somehow that seemed to hurt her more than the legal exposure. Then a younger resident near the back finally said the thing everybody else had been thinking. "Did you seriously call deputies on him over land you knew might not belong to the HOA?" Vanessa opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out immediately. And in Hollow Creek Estates, silence from Vanessa Holloway was something nobody had ever seen before. The silence after that question did more damage to Vanessa Holloway than any argument I could have made. Rain hammered the pavilion roof hard enough now that people had to lean closer to hear each other, and somehow that made the whispers feel even more personal. Smaller, meaner, more dangerous. Vanessa finally tried to answer, but before she could, another set of headlights rolled through the fog from the upper gravel entrance near the clubhouse road. Black County SUV. Official plates. The mood shifted instantly again. Deputy Collins straightened slightly when he saw it. "Well," he muttered under his breath, "that was faster than expected." A tall woman in a dark rain jacket stepped out carrying a leather portfolio against her side, while another county vehicle pulled in behind her. This one marked Risk Management Division across the door. The residents near the pavilion started murmuring immediately. Insurance people. County people. In HOA communities, that combination scares people worse than police. Vanessa's face lost what little color she still had left. The woman approached through the rain without rushing. Mid-40s maybe. Calm. Professional. The kind of person who made problems expensive for a living. "Dana Keller," she said, showing county credentials to Collins before turning toward the shoreline construction. "We received a liability escalation request from zoning about unauthorized improvements on disputed property." Nobody under the pavilion spoke after that. You could hear rainwater dripping off the dock railings into the lake and the distant creak of empty boat lifts moving in the wind. Dana walked slowly past the unfinished pathway while one of the surveyors explained the encroachment markers. Vanessa attempted to regain control one last time. "This community has operated in good faith for years," she said carefully. "There is no reason to imply misconduct before a full review." Dana stopped walking and looked at her evenly. "Ma'am, your board approved permanent construction while documented ownership concerns existed." Vanessa folded her arms tighter. "Based on outdated information, including the warning letter from Harold Bennett?" Dana asked. That hit like a gunshot in church. The residents reacted instantly because it confirmed the thing everybody feared most now. Vanessa had known. One of the board members near the SUVs quietly said, "Oh my God," and actually stepped farther away from her in the rain. Another pulled out his phone and started typing furiously, probably warning his wife or his attorney or both. Hollow Creek had officially entered survival mode. Dana opened her portfolio and handed Collins several documents sealed in plastic sleeves against the weather. "Pending county review," she said clearly. "All shoreline construction authority held by the Hollow Creek Homeowners Association is temporarily suspended effective immediately." Vanessa blinked hard. "You cannot suspend the board over a preliminary dispute." "Not the board," Dana corrected calmly. "It's authority over this parcel. Worse somehow. Much worse. Because everybody standing there understood what it meant. Vanessa Holloway no longer controlled the shoreline she had spent years treating like her personal kingdom. Residents started openly talking over her now. "What happens to our dues? Who approved those contracts? Are we getting assessed for this mess? Nobody directed questions at Vanessa anymore. They directed them around her like she had already become politically radioactive. I stood near the rain-dark dock railing watching the entire thing unravel while cold wind rolled fog across the water in slow waves. For months, I had dreaded becoming isolated in Hollow Creek. But standing there beside the lake, listening to the community quietly turn on the woman who once controlled every conversation in the neighborhood, I realized something strange. Vanessa was finally alone. 3 weeks later, the rain finally stopped over Blackwater Lake. Cold morning fog drifted low across the shoreline, while county crews removed the temporary barricades around the unfinished dock path one section at a time. The sound of impact drivers and reversing pickup trucks echoed softly through the cedar trees where the HOA construction trailers used to sit. Only now the trailers belonged to the county investigation team. Hollow Creek looked different without Vanessa Holloway controlling every conversation. Quieter. Nervous. People waved again when I drove past the mail kiosk in the mornings. Not everybody, but enough to notice. The emergency HOA meeting happened on a Thursday night under fluorescent lights inside the clubhouse that smelled like burnt coffee and wet carpet from all the storm traffic. I did not even plan on attending until Eleanor Whitaker called and told me half the neighborhood was showing up. She was right. By 7 o'clock, the parking lot was overflowing with pickup trucks and SUVs. Rainwater still dripping from wheel wells while residents packed into folding chairs inside like they were waiting for a verdict. Vanessa sat at the front table in a navy blazer that suddenly looked too formal for the room. Nobody greeted her anymore. Nobody smiled at her. The silence around her felt physical. One board member resigned before the meeting even started. Another admitted the shoreline contracts had been approved without full disclosure of the Bennett warning letter. Then Dana Keller from County Risk Management stood up and calmly explained the exposure facing the HOA if construction had continued after ownership concerns were documented internally. You could hear people breathing. That was it. Just breathing and the hum of old fluorescent lights overhead. Then the room exploded into whispers. Questions. Anger. Fear about dues and lawsuits and insurance premiums. Vanessa tried to regain control twice. This board acted in the community's best interest, she said sharply at one point. But it sounded smaller now. Hello. Somebody from the back answered. You tried to have a homeowner removed from his own property. Another resident added. You knew there was a dispute. Then came the moment that ended her. Dale Brunner stood slowly from the second row and said the thing nobody in Hollow Creek would have dared say a month earlier. You stopped acting like a neighbor a long time ago. Dead silence after that. Vanessa looked around the room waiting for support that never came. No allies. No reassuring nods. No board members stepping in. Just exhausted homeowners staring back at her like they were finally seeing her clearly for the first time. She resigned 14 minutes later. No applause. No shouting. Somehow that made it worse. 2 months after that, the county finalized the parcel review. The shoreline trail was rerouted legally around my property line. The unfinished dock extension got removed entirely at HOA expense after insurance refused coverage on the disputed construction. I never sued the residents. That surprised people. Truth was, most of them were manipulated same as everybody else. What I did do was install a cedar gate near the original shoreline entrance with a small brass sign that read private property beyond this point. Nothing aggressive. Nothing theatrical. Just clear. One cold October morning, I stood beside that gate holding a coffee thermos while fog rolled quietly across the lake and early sunlight cut through the cedar trees above the waterline. For the first time since moving to Hollow Creek, the place finally felt peaceful again. No whispers. No violation notices taped to my mailbox. No fake smiles hiding threats. Just lake wind, wet cedar, and silence. Looking back now, the craziest part is how fast power collapses once people stop being afraid of it. Vanessa Holloway spent years controlling that neighborhood through pressure, embarrassment, and manufactured authority. But the moment the truth became public, the entire system turned on her almost overnight. That is the real lesson in all this. Most bullies do not survive exposure. They survive isolation. The second people compare notes, ask questions, and stop confusing confidence with honesty, everything changes. Hollow Creek learned that the hard way. And honestly, so did I. Because for months after my divorce, I kept thinking peace meant avoiding conflict at all costs. Turns out peace sometimes means standing still long enough for the truth to catch up with the people trying to bury it. Last I heard, Vanessa sold her house that winter. Nobody made a scene about it. One moving truck. Gray morning. Rain on the clubhouse roof. A few curtains moving as neighbors watched quietly from their kitchens. Then she was gone. Sometimes I still see fresh fog rolling across Blackwater Lake at sunrise and think about that morning she called deputies on me beside the shoreline. Funny thing is, she was right about one thing. Somebody absolutely was trespassing that day. Rank the story from 10 to 0. I would love to know what you think.